so what does Joe like? Joe-san wa nani ga suki desu ka? That's the format we were looking for. A lot of people were groping around for that and not finding it during the OPI.
I know there was a ga in there, but I couldn't remember the order.
Sushi to inu ga suki desu. Hai, ii desu ne.
He likes dog sushi?
Yeah. There's a to in there. They're two separate items.
Not inu no sushi.
Right, not inu no sushi, just sushi to inu. What is the dog's name? Inu no namae wa nan desu ka? Doraku-san. Oh, so it should be Doreiku. So how would we change that spelling then? De. Doreiku-san. Yeah, instead of ra. Otherwise, it sounds like Doraku, which sounds like you're voting for Dracula.
It's a blood-sucking dog. Doraku.
I don't think I want a dog named Dracula. Okay, where does Amber live? Doko wa Amba ni sundemasu ka? That sounds like you're saying.
Where is Amber
eh,
living? I don't know.
That's just
Where?
Wow.
lives-
I can't even
Nonsense.
translate that into English.
Where lives in Amber?
Yeah. Where lives in Amber? Question mark. Yeah, something like that.
Insects.
So what do we need to switch?
The particle.
Amba-san wa doko ni sundemasu ka? So this part and this part need to swap places. Amba-san wa doko ni sundemasu ka? Amba-san wa kaikasu biru ni sundemasu. Right?
I know my handwriting isn't the best, but that's a very weird looking knee.
Oh, okay.
It's like a flag.
Yeah, usually these two are spread out more, so it's a little bit more even. Okay, what is Zach wearing? Zach-san wa nani o kiteimasu ka? T-shirtsを着ていて、帽子をかぶっていて、ジーンズを履いています。いいですね。Any questions about that one? 質問がありますか？Yeah. Good one. Who is that? あの人は誰ですか？サンドリンさん。
And the
Yes.
sun.
Okay.
Yes.
Where does Beezy's dad work? Beezy さんのお父さんはどこに勤めていますか？
Oh,
動物園です。
there was supposed to be.
何ですか？
He works at a zoo? Dobutsu? Dobutsu?
動物園？
He works at a hospital.
Oh, okay,
but,
yeah.
but they told me Dobotsuen was zoo. What's the word for zoo?
動物園。
Dobutsu.
Dobotsuen?
動
Oh.
物園。
Ah.
動物園。
I wanted to put Yakuza, but I didn't know if it fit the question.
Yeah. But 本当は病院でしょ？だから病院に勤めています。
I think I said he works for sick in the thing. I said Yoki, isn't that sick?
はい、病院。
病気に
病院に勤めています。ね、病院に勤めています。はい、but you're in school as Cassie's sister. Cassie さん。
Kashi.
That- okay,
That's the way
that's-
she wants it.
Okay.
Kayashi.
Kashi. It's
Usually
Kashi.
it would be either kya
Got
or
me in
ka.
trouble.
That's
Kashi?
how my teacher.
That's how your teacher up north spells it? Weird.
You can make it.
Kashi?
Is that like a small yacht?
Yeah.
Yes, I read
Kashi.
Okay.
It's Kashi.
Kashi. If that's how you want to spell it, that's how you can spell it.
Kashi-san.
Weird, but
Kashi.
日本人ですか？向こうの先生は日本人ですか？
She lived there for 5 years.
Okay, but she's American too. Okay. Okay, Kashi
use that for?
This is the non,
Ah, oh.
have we covered that one yet?
I mean, it's
Yeah,
in the
there's
book,
something
but we
wrong
haven't
with my
had it
knee,
for a
too.
book.
Yeah, no, we haven't covered that one
You
yet.
guys
Yeah.
looked around?
I mean, it was in the book, we just haven't covered it officially.
Right, yeah, so non means thisか、2 means this. じゃあ、質問がありますか? Any questions about any of these? So, I thought that it would be good as a warm-up, since problems with these kinds of questions kept coming up over and over in everybody's OPIs. So
And
I
it'll be on
thought,
the test, too.
yeah, and yes, content like this will be on the test. In fact, this is almost like a paraphrase of an actual test question. So I'm glad somebody did it in three-part, in a single sentence with TED forms, because that's exactly what I'm looking for on the test, and there is a question very similar to this on the test. Okay, so that was cool. The next thing I wanted to ask is, in your workbook activities, do you have questions about any specific ones? Are there particular ones that would be good practice for us to work on the board? Because if so, I would like to go ahead and have people write some of those up. While you're looking, I can start erasing. If no one has particular questions, I was thinking what we could do is a sort of one of each kind of thing, where we pick a challenging question from each category, each type of exercise, and go over at least one of each to see if we dig up any issues that people wanted help with that way. But if you've got specific ones that you really wanted to cover, I'd rather do those before we do random ones.
Just out of curiosity, what's up in the next chapter?
Short forms.
We can finally talk like casual people now?
Yeah, casual speech is coming up.
Yay!
8th and 9th chapters, they do present tense short forms in chapter 8, and then chapter 9 does past tense short forms.
When do we actually get to learn how to say colors? Because,
I believe that's also lesson 9.
so they have a different conjugation entirely from the adjectives we know?
No, some of them are adjectives and some of them are nouns.
Oh.
Oh, yeah, this is that.
So it's like saying something is red as opposed to this red car.
Yeah. And the ones that are nouns, you can still modify with a no if you want to have it, like midori no kasa would be a green umbrella.
The
Okay.
pictures are really funny.
Okay.
Wait, what page are you on?
For the lesson 8 ones, like there's
Oh.
one where the girl's gonna jump off a building. It's like behind
Where?
her, like don't jump off the building.
I don't see it. What the hell?
From all the drinking and cigarette smoking they do.
Yeah.
Oh, that! That is messed up!
Oh God, that is.
And then there's one where it looks like he's changing, and she opened the door, and look how happy she is. She's like, hello, Dad.
She's like, it's a little pervert girl.
Okay.
Pictures are weird.
They've only got progressively like weirder too as we've gone.
Okay, well, let's look at lesson 7 still for a little bit longer so that we can help you guys prepare for the test
Right.
on Thursday. Hi.
Number 7 on page 70 says, 日本人の友達が何人いますか? Is it just 2人? 2人います?
Wait, what?
You could answer it that way, yes. Just,
Or,
日本人の友達が何人いますか?
so how many Japanese?
70ページ
Yeah.
7番。
Oh, okay. I was looking at the.
日本人の友達が何人いますか? So yeah, you could say 2人います if you only have 2 friends who are Japanese. Yeah.
And then if you have 3 or more, it would be like 3人.
Yes, 3人います.
And there's no particle there.
Right.
It's not 3人がいます.
No. 日本人の友達が 3人います。
Oh,
So
okay.
the ga is before the number, not after the number.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
so, yeah, the
Japanese
structure of
friends,
the-
I have two.
Yeah, so the structure is gonna parallel the question. The number takes the place where the non is in the question.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Maybe.
And then the first part, everything before the non becomes optional at that point because it's understood from the question. So you don't have to repeat it back. So, 日本人の友達が何人いますか ?6 人います。Or however many you want to
Friends,
say.
yeah.
How
Okay.
many Japanese people,
Yeah.
friends do you have? You know, I would have a hard time counting that high, but that's because I lived there for so long.
This isn't really too much of a question, it's more of a curiosity, but they actually use the katakana for boyfriend?
はい、ボーイフレンド、
Do they actually have,
ガールフレンド、ボーイフレンド。Yes, they have other words for those. 彼女 and 彼 or 彼氏。
yeah,
But
the
those
him,
are-
her,
Yeah, those are him and her. 彼 is him, 彼女 is her. 彼氏 actually is more specifically boyfriend. They don't have a way to modify 彼女 to make it more obviously girlfriend, not just her. But those terms do get used more frequently for boyfriend, girlfriend than they do for the pronouns him and her.
okay.
But if you want to be really sure that the other person knows that you mean boyfriend or girlfriend
They
and
katakana
not
is-
him or her, then you can use the katakana ones, and that makes it very clear that you don't mean the other possible interpretation of those terms,
So if you want the opposite, where you're wanting to be very clear that you mean,
him or her.
so could you just say onna no hito instead of kanojo?
No, yeah, well, 彼女 can mean her. 女の人 means a woman, but if you want to specifically say that woman, then you would say 女の人.
Okay, so onna no hito is safer than kanojo.
That's safer than 彼女 if
Okay.
you don't want to
Have them mistake
have
them as your
them-
girlfriend.
Yeah, yeah, if you're afraid that somebody could make that mistake, then 女の人 is
That one.
very clear, that woman.
Wait, is it very specific that it's your boyfriend or girlfriend and not someone else's?
It can be someone else's boyfriend or girlfriend if that's who you've been talking about. A lot of times in conversation, if a guy is talking about his girlfriend specifically, he'll stick his pinky finger out. Because that's like hand sign for kanojo, for girlfriend. And if a girl is talking about her boyfriend and she wants to make sure people know that that's who she means, she'll stick her thumb out to mean kareshi. And that's, when she says kare, she might do that. And that is like the hand sign for boyfriend, apparently.
Is it anything to do with like engagement rings or something? Or?
No, it seems to be just one kind of, one
Cultural
finger
quirk.
for boys and different finger for girl. And
So what if somebody made this gesture?
that would mean something entirely different, and they would probably need to know something else.
More context.
Yeah, more context, because, yeah, I don't think that gesture means much of anything in Japanese culture, unless they happen to be, like, because isn't that like a surfer sign?
Yeah.
So, you know, I would guess that Japanese surfers maybe know what Americans mean by that sign, but they don't necessarily use it otherwise.
I see.
Okay. Other questions about anything specific
Oh wait, that's
From
chapter 8.
from this chapter?
Just that all the
Or
chapter
any-
exercises just
Any
bleed
particular,
together.
even if all of the, even if you did these exercises already and didn't find any of them difficult, are there specific types of grammar points that you feel like you want more practice on?
As for counting people, would you add a
Mhm.
particle after the word, like say futari wa?
Study
Oh,
you
yeah,
must
I was
know.
in
Okay,
the-
so it sounds like counting people is an issue.
Yes.
Am I right?
Yeah.
Okay, so let's do some simple, let's come up with some English sentences about how many people in different things, and then work on translating.
How
How
many
about
people
that?
live in your house?
Okay. How many people live in your house? Okay, so should we work this one as a class? And then maybe from that, then we can come up with a few more random sentences and let people try to figure them out. Okay, so how many people live in your house? What do you guys think we need to start with?
Whatever the
house.
word for
Name no
how-
uchi wa.
Okay,
Like, san no uchi wa.
okay, so the,
right, the
okay,
location.
so we can assume that, let's say, if we're asking Sandlin this question, so it would start with Sandlin san no
Uchi?
uchi, yeah. And we haven't learned that kanji yet, right? So I'll just
Don't
let
think
it-
so. Excuse me?
Uchi,
San no
Uchi de.
wa.
Uchi
uchi
Ni?
ni sunde.
wa.
Nanin
Uchi
sunde
ni wa?
masu.
Yeah, we'll talk about that in a second, okay.
Nanin ni sunde masu.
Uchi ni wa nan ni, okay, nan nin, I'll just spell it out. Nan nin sunde ka?
Would there be a particle there?
I'm
Would it
trying to
think
think
we
about
need?
Uchi ni wa nan nin ga sunde ka?
Cause she just said there was no particle for the word before.
Okay.
San ni desu. Or san ni imasu.
Nan nin sunde ka? Yeah, and then if you're just asking how many people live in your house, san-san no uchi ni wa nan nin sunde ka? If you're asking like how many Americans are in
A class.
this class, for example, okay. How many Americans are in this class? Let's say American students.
Yeah. What, you don't count? I just
Okay.
remember that.
Okay, so how many American students are in this class? This is gonna be slightly different, so, kono what?
Kurasu.
Kono kurasu
Class.
ni
Ni.
wa.
Ni wa? Okay.
Yeah, we're gonna talk about that in a second, don't worry. Kono kurasu ni wa
Gatsei.
Amerikajin.
America
America
Jin,
Jin.
good.
No
America Jin
No
no
gatsei.
gakusei. Have we had the kanji for
Yeah.
gakusei?
Yeah.
I thought so.
うん。
このクラスにはアメリカ人の学生が何人
何人います。
いますか? Okay, so let's compare and contrast these two. This is just asking how many people live in your house. This is asking how many American students are in the class. So when it's just people versus
A specific type. of
specific
people.
kind of people, there's a difference. Okay? If American students versus Americans, just American. If we're not mentioning students, then it would just be America Jin ga nanin imasu ka? So this part would get taken out if you were taking out students, right?
Yeah.
このクラスにはアメリカ人が何人いますか? 三年さんのうちには何人住んでいますか? Do you see how there's a difference there between how many people of a certain type exist in this place versus just how many people live in this place
So
or exist
people in
this
general,
place?
no particle. Specific types of people, particle.
Yeah.
If the verb was sundeimasu for both sentences, would it be Amerikajin no gakko or gakusei ni sundeimasu ka instead of no gakusei ga
Okay.
nan ni imasu ka?
Okay, let's talk about that. So how many American students live in the house?
Okay.
live in that house. Okay, so let's work this one over here. So, how many Americans live in that house? Live in that house. Yes?
Yes.
Okay, so that house would be,
その家。
okay, or I was gonna do ano, but
Ano.
either one.
あ
Ano
の家
ie,
は。
Ano?
庭あは。
ano ie ni, or ano ie ni wa. Okay, the wa is optional on all of these, really.
Oh, I thought that was like some sort of area.
We'll talk about ni wa in a second. Okay, so ano ie ni,
アメリカ人。
American.
Amerikajin
Oh,
ga.
が。
God.
If it's wa, then it's going to be ga here. If you leave out this wa, you could put wa here. Ano ie ni wa, Amerikajin ga
死んでいます。
nan nin.
何人死んでいます。
Nan nin sunde imasu ka. So what the difference is here is in English, we don't have to say American people. We just say Americans, right?
Yeah.
In Japanese, Americans and people get separated when you're asking how many. So American people, how many? So the non-mean is the how many part, right? But it's how many people. In English, you don't say how many people who are Americans live in that house, right? You can just say how many Americans.
But since we're saying アメリカ人, aren't we really saying people twice?
Right.
Yeah.
So in English, that would be redundant. In Japanese, it's necessary. Okay? Where it's not necessary is over here because you're not specifying the kind of people. Does that make sense? So over here, 3年さんのうちには何人住んでいますか? You don't need a particle and you don't need another modifier for people for that particular sentence, right? But if you've got another modifier for people, such as Americans or American students, then you've got the larger phrase and the ga comes into play. So, このクラスにはアメリカ人の学生が何人いますか? Or あの家にはアメリカ人が何人住んでいますか? Okay? Now the ni versus ni wa contrast. I think it's covered in a later chapter, but I'll just touch on it briefly since it came up here. Ni you need because
It's a place.
you're talking about in that location, right? So it's in that house. It's in this class, in your house. That in requires a ni as the particle that translates.
Okay.
Okay? The wa is really just saying that this whole phrase of in that house is what we're talking about. That's the topic. Okay? So it's identifying the whole phrase of ano ie ni as being
Where?
the topic of the sentence, the thing that the sentence is talking about.
So that entire thing is like the subject?
Yeah, it's like the subject of the sentence. It's saying, in that house, how many Americans live there?
Okay, so
Talking about that house, how many Americans are involved?
so why is the
Okay.
wa optional?
Because you don't have to put that much emphasis on the in that house part. You could just say,
In that house, how many
how many Americans live in that house? Or how many Americans live in that house? What we do with tone of voice in English,
So
emphasis versus straight, Japanese does with particles.
Ah.
Does that make sense?
So the wa would put more emphasis on
The
in that house.
wa is like emphasizing that
Stress.
in the English. Okay, English does it with voice stress, We do it by emphasizing a certain word in the sentence, right? Japanese intonation doesn't usually do that as strongly as English does. But what they do instead is they stick an extra particle in there that we
Oh.
wouldn't otherwise necessarily use. So, so does that clarify a little bit what ni wa is doing versus ni? So you can say, あの家にアメリカ人が何人住んでいますか?
Or would it be wa after America Gene if you don't use it?
あの家にアメリカ人は何人住んでいますか? It's optional. You could do either one. If you leave out the wa, ga or wa both work. Ga works because it's a question, and question sentences normally take ga in that spot. Wa would work if you're kind of shifting your emphasis to Americajin. Like, you know that there are a dozen people living in that house, but you're wondering how many of them are actually American. Because of the dozen people, maybe you're pretty sure that 4 of them are Chinese, and you're not sure how many of the rest of them might be some other nationality. You know?
So
Right.
then, as far as the answers go, because I was trying to think in the OPI, like, how do you say, like, these 3 people, like, these 3 girls?
Kono san nin.
So you can just stick a kono in front of the number?
Yeah.
Okay. I didn't know if I could say kono san nin wa.
Yeah. Yeah. Kono san nin wa ane no kodomo desu. Or something like that. That's what you were trying to go for, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so you can say, この3人は
So these 3
お姉さんの子
people,
供です。
so
Yeah,
these people, are they your sister's children?
Yeah, these 3 people are his sister's kids. So, この3人はお姉さんの子供です。
And,
Or, この2人は嬢さんの妹です。
so these 2 people. And, like, that sentence almost requires a point, right?
Yes.
Looking at a picture, you can't
Yeah.
just say kono, because they're going to go, which 3 people?
Right, yeah, you would either be pointing to the picture, or you would be like introducing the people standing there in person. この2人は私の妹です. You know, you've got your 2 little sisters standing right next to you, and you're pointing at them and saying, この2人は私の妹です. These are my little sisters.
I see.
Make sense? And just as a point of interest, the term for twins, since we've got a couple, is
Yeah.
futago.
Futago.
Hi. It's the same futa from futari. Futa, 2 people,
Yeah.
right? And then I believe the kanji for the go is the same go that is ko in kodomo. I believe it's just written futago like that.
So
I could be wrong, but it's like 2 child, like, you know, 2 of you born at once, so, yeah, futago. And I don't know offhand what the terms are for triplets and quadruplets and such, but I believe there's
Sango?
variations on the theme. But I don't know offhand. That would be an interesting thing to look up if somebody's interested. I've never had triplets in my class, so I've never bothered to look it up. The most I've had thus far is twins, and I've found many sets of twins over the years, come to think of it. You guys were not the first. You guys and Raina and Hannah that were in your class originally. Before that, I'd had another set of twins. And I'm trying to remember if there were any others.
Not to mention in Japanese, one class, they were Korean, right? Musan?
Oh, yeah, Musan and
Sophie.
Suwon? No.
I can't remember.
Sohi, thank you. Sohi.
So,
But I don't know if they were twins.
I know they were related.
They were siblings, but I don't know if they were twins. Yeah, and Kruin and Haley, they're not twins though, but actually Kruin's a twin.
Of someone else.
Yes, he's got a twin brother. But they didn't take that.
They were Korean, right? Or not?
Yeah, Sohi and Mu were.
Because I remember one time I walked past them in the library and I heard Korean. And
Yeah.
I spun and it was them. I was like, oh.
Yeah,
That's cool.
yeah.
Don't remember what Korean sounds like though.
Yeah. 안녕하세요.
If you hear a da at the end of the sentence, it's probably good.
That's,
It's a good rule of thumb.
Nida, yeah, but not always because da is also the short form of des
Oh,
in
right.
Japanese. But if you hear like imnida, mnida, sumnida, that's Korean.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm trying to figure out how all this stuff sounds, because I know how French sounds, I know how German sounds.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
I'm just trying to get a feel for
Yeah.
some of these languages.
2년 동안 한국에서 영어 가르쳤어요. I taught English in Korea for 2 years.
Cool.
It's more.
I'm a lot more rusty than I used to be, but I
I
still
know
remember the
Chinese is a
basics.
very distinctive thing, as does Japanese, but
Chinese you pick up instantly, it's Chinese.
Yeah.
It doesn't sound like
Yeah.
any other language.
it's a lot like back
So-
the throat
Sometimes
flow.
it sounds a little bit like Vietnamese. Southern Chinese dialects sound a little bit more like Vietnamese. Anyway,
Getting back on topic.
yes, getting back on topic. Lesson 7, other questions. Do you guys want to do more practices with counting people specifically? Would it be useful for me to like make up a few more sentences for you guys to work through with counting people, or do you feel like you got the hang of it now?
I feel like I got it. I don't know about everything. We can do
Okay.
it.
Anybody feel like they want to do that, or do you want to move on to something different?
I wrote something down.
Okay.
Same here.
So, like what? So what else do you guys feel like we need to work on? That's the next question.
I don't know.
What about the kanji section? Have you looked
Oh,
through
right.
that yet? And are there questions in the kanji section that you wanted to practice?
Come on, book, work with me. That's it. Here we go.
Yeah, things like Ms. Minami speaks English a little. Does anybody feel like they need help with a sentence like that, or?
Then I wrote Minami-san wa chotto eigo o hanashimasu.
That works.
Or hanashiteimasu.
So it's like she speaks a little English.
Yeah, chotto eigo hanashimasu is actually better than hanashiteimasu because it doesn't mean that she's currently speaking that little bit of English. It just means that she's able to speak a little bit of English, right? So chotto hanashimasu means that she has a small amount of English ability. Hanashiteimasu means she's speaking right now.
What about hanaseru?
We haven't learned it yet, but that would be more accurate.
It's
Yeah,
that
chotto
loud
hanasemasu.
stuff that he goes on
Yeah,
saying.
yeah.
I have a kanji question.
Hanaseru. Hi.
In the kanji for chisai, at least what I think it is, it's on page 179 in the book,
Hi.
Textbook or workbook?
textbook. Can it be read as o?
Sometimes.
Because I guess her name is Okawa, but it's written with chisai and kawa.
Yes. That's a very interesting,
Small river,
Ah.
but Okawa, not Chisakawa.
yeah. Let me write a
It's
couple
Ogawa,
of,
actually, I think.
Ogawa, yeah.
okay.
Oh yes,
That's
it's
how I was
the
confused.
Chinese pronunciation.
And the other one is 2 Ogawa.
Ogawa. Whoa.
Yeah,
Okawa, okay.
yeah. Ogawa, Ogawa, or Okawa. I think both are possible with this one. You could do kawa, and I think gawa is equally possible. But yeah, a single o for chisai and a double o for oki is pretty common in Japanese surnames. I knew someone named
Well,
I think this guy actually pronounced his name with a kol instead. O and kol are both possible pronunciations of this chisai. So he was Komori-san. And then one of my classmates was Omori-san.
what's that last
Small
kanji?
forest and big forest.
Ah,
I like how
That would-
forest is just 3 trees.
exactly.
Yes.
It's so easy to
Yeah.
That
remember.
makes sense.
Yeah, yeah, they actually, this one you know is tree, ki, right? Also
Wasn't it
moku.
Moku?
Yeah, moku when it's in like mokyobi, ki, when it's a standalone, like,
Oh,
anoki wa takai desu ne.
that tree is very tall.
Hi. Okay, and then this one, Hayashi, is woods. And
Oh.
also a very common surname, Hayashi by itself, or this becomes Kobayashi. The
Oh.
ha changes to ba in this compound, and you get Kobayashi, which is another common surname. Also, you may have heard of Kobayashi Maru if you're a Star Trek fan.
I'm
Yeah.
not really a
Ko-
big Star
Kobai-
Trek fan.
So, Ki, Hayashi, or Kobayashi, different options, and then Mori is 3 trees, and then I believe
There's a
that
4-tree?
the 4-tree piece is one part of the rainforest term. I believe it's a 2 kanji compound for rainforest, but I believe they may actually write it with 4 trees. I've just heard of that one, I've never actually bothered to look it up, but somebody
Those
look
things
up
are-
rainforest sometime and see if that actually comes up.
I'm just saying, those have got to be written tiny.
Yeah. But yeah, Mori is a very common one. Hayashi and Mori are both common surnames in Japanese. Hayashi is also a common Chinese surname, so Chinese people who have that surname, they can just very easily convert that to Japanese if they're studying Japanese and traveling to Japan.
So you have the,
I don't think Mori shows up as a Chinese surname very often, or maybe never at all, I don't know for
but that
sure.
whole Mahu thing, that's just a common boy's name ending, right?
No, Maru means ship.
Oh.
It actually, Maru by itself means like a circle, something round, but for some
Oh.
reason it's also a ship designation. It may be a case of homophones rather than this being
Oh.
the same kanji, but for some reason, the way we have ships designated as USS
SS.
blah, blah, blah,
But
Japanese ships usually are named something or other Maru.
but there are people with that in their name, right?
Maru? Not that
Are they?
Not that I can think of.
Hmm.
Ro is a common common boy's
Ah,
name ending, like Jiro, Saburo,
maybe I'm just getting the two mixed up.
Kenjiro.
And
Yeah.
is that a kanji that means anything, like cold in girls' names?
The ro is actually just sort of a masculine ending. It doesn't have, I don't
Any
think
meaning?
it has a special meaning other than male.
Oh,
But
so
it's
so
not the
it's
otoko kanji.
so but it's kind of like how we add like vowels at the end of some names to make it female.
Yeah, sort of like that. Another, the otoko kanji actually can occur as a name ender, and it's usually pronounced o in that case. So like Masao, I think Masao would be this kanji. Masao, most likely. And that's a common boy's name. And then Masayo, with a yo ending instead of an o ending, becomes a female name. Or Masako, that's also a female version of that name.
Wow.
There are a number of kanji that occur in both masculine and feminine names. It's just a matter of
The
how
end.
they get combined with the second kanji. So like Yukihiro is a boy's name, Hiroyuki is another boy's name, but Hiroko and Yukiko are both girls'
Yeah.
names. And they can use the same kanji as the boy's name version.
Wow.
Yeah, just the ko ending instead of combining two. Hiroyuki is like wide or broad and snow, so like a broad field of snow would be Hiroyuki. And then Hiroko and Yukiko are like, you know, just that
So is
part.
there any common ending syllable like
Well, like I said, ro
Yeah,
is a
ro
common
and-
ending for boys.
and ko for female?
Yeah, ro, almost any given name that ends in ro is likely to be a guy's name. If it ends in ko or yo or mi, it's probably a girl's name. Another way to tell the difference sometimes is boys' names are more likely to be 4 syllables or more. Girls' names are usually 3 syllables and sometimes only 2.
Might wanna just write that down so I know.
Right.
So,
Hold on, BZ-san has
yeah,
a
I'm
question
just
too.
trying to get my pencil.
In the book, it talks about the Teiru forms of iku and iru,
Yeah,
and it says like, Shugoku ni iteimasu.
hey,
Doesn't mean she's going to China. It means she has gone to
and
or
is still there,
/ is in China.
right.
So how do you say going if you can't say iteimasu? With that,
Probably they would use like ikutochu, she's in the midst of going.
I just thought that was really weird.
Yeah,
Because I feel like, could you
yeah.
just say ima? Ima chugoku ni iteima.
Imachi.
Right now, she's going to China versus right now she's.
Like she's
That's
on the
still-
transit there?
In transit versus she's still on the trip. I think ima chugoku ni itemasu could still mean she's still in China now, she hasn't come home yet. Versus ima, 中国に行く途中です. Tochu is a kanji compound that means in the midst of going.
Okay.
So ikutochu would be probably the phrase, which we just haven't learned that grammar yet.
So you would do the same thing probably for uchi ni kiteimasu, means somebody has come over, not somebody's coming over.
Yeah, if they're gonna be coming pretty soon, これからうちに来ます. They're coming to our house pretty soon. うちに来ます. They're going to come. We don't know if they're, we don't know if they've left their house yet or not, but they haven't arrived at our house yet. So, うちに来ます. うちに来ています is more like they're already here and they're staying for a while and they haven't left yet. Yeah, isn't that weird though?
Yeah, I mean, I guess.
Yeah,
I guess
but that's just that's the idiom.
I
You
guess the
know?
way to look at it is like the event of going to somebody's house is
Yes.
still going on. So
Right,
they're in the
exactly.
middle of coming to our house. Means
Yeah.
like once they leave, they'll say they came. But
Right.
right now, they're still coming to our house.
Right, yeah, they're still visiting.
Yeah.
Yeah, so yeah, they use the verb kitemas almost like we would use visiting. She's visiting my house, which ni kitemas.
And it just also means coming.
Yeah, but it does mean coming in other contexts, but if like you were trying to convey the sense that she has left her house and she's on the road but she hasn't arrived at my house yet, but she is coming to my house, again, you would probably say, uchi ni kuru tochu desu. She's in the midst of coming to
Okay.
the house. They just use a different phrase for it because that other phrase idiomatically has come to mean that she's still visiting.
Like she's still there?
Yeah, like she's still here in my house. She came an hour ago, we've been hanging out and talking this whole time, and she's still here and she's not gonna leave for a while yet.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I wrote it meaning like ing, like.
Right,
knowing,
and it's
then I
just,
remember
yeah.
I just read it in the book.
Yeah, so it's good that the book explained that because that's certainly not intuitive.
Yeah. You definitely wouldn't think that.
Yeah, that's one of those things where you just wouldn't.
And I have another question about.
Yeah.
I think we learned the verb tetsudao already. I think we did that one.
The verb tense for which?
Tetsudao.
Tetsudao, the verb tetsudao, yeah.
Tetsudao is,
Tetsudatte?
Hi,
Kudasai.
tetsudatte kudasai,
Tetsudatte
please
does
help
that mean
me.
help me or let me help you?
Tetsudatte kudasai would be please help me. Tetsudaimashou ka would be may I help you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I've heard with the, like, what is it, kureru?
Tetsudatte kureru would be a more, that would be a more casual please help me. Kudasai is more formal, kureru is more casual.
Okay, and like, tetsudatte ageru?
Tetsudatte ageru is I'll give you some help. Ageru is to give to someone else.
Okay.
So-
Kureru is to receive from someone.
Yeah.
Okay, I just heard it that way, and then I didn't know if kudasai meant help them or
Yeah,
them
no,
help you. Or...
Kudasai means please give me, but remember it's this kanji, right? Kudasai, because it's like you're putting yourself down here and you're putting the other person that you're asking for a favor up here and you're asking them, please give this to me. You know, so you're like putting them up on a pedestal, saying they're more important than you. Please do me the favor of giving this to me.
Okay, so,
So,
follow-up question. If
Yeah.
you were saying past tense, like I helped them, is it rude to say tetsu, if it's a friend, tetsuratta?
tetsuratta, tetsudaimashita, yeah.
Tetsuratta kurimashita, like, do you need the full?
No, you wouldn't use the please in that structure necessarily.
So like the kuraru and ageru don't.
You don't need it, you could use it, tetsuratte ageta, tetsuratte agemashita.
Yeah.
I gave her some help, but it can sound like bragging
Okay.
to
That's-
use
that's
that
what I-
structure, so just tetsudaimashita is a little bit less
Braggy.
bragging sounding.
I was afraid it would sound like sarcastic, like tetsuratta,
Yeah.
like I helped them, but because he needed
Tetsudaimashita.
it, you know, like
Yeah.
tetsuratta. It just sounds like.
Yeah, you can soften it so that it doesn't sound so rude by saying chotto tetsudaimashita or
Okay,
something.
I helped him out a little.
Okay.
Help them out a little bit,
Okay.
yeah. He didn't need that much help, I just helped him a little bit.
Okay.
Yeah, and most of the time Japanese people do that culturally. They will downplay their own actions that were good, and they will kind of
Emphasize.
emphasize or exaggerate somebody else's good deeds or their own shortcomings.
Mm.
So they'll downplay other people's shortcomings and play up their own, and they'll downplay their own good deeds and play up someone else's. And that's just part of Japanese modesty. That's considered the polite way to express it. Even if you feel on the inside like you did a really great thing there, you ought to get more credit for it, you're not supposed to say so in Japanese culture. So that's a strong cultural norm that is very different from ours, which is part of the reason why Japanese people sometimes have a stereotype that Americans brag a lot. Because even when we're just saying
Being straight to
something
the point.
normally, just being straight that, you know, I accomplished X, Y, Z, and we're not necessarily trying to brag that much, to Japanese people it might sound like bragging from their perspective because they would say it in a more humble way. You know, if you ask somebody, what do they play an instrument, say?
Okay.
You will not find out from them that they're actually a professional violinist. They will just say, oh yeah, I play violin a little bit. And then you'll find out from somewhere else that, oh, you were actually talking to the Yitzhak Perlman of Japan.
Unless, of course, you ask, where do you work? Like, where do you
Right,
play?
and well, even if you ask, like, where do you work, they'll give the name of the company, not the job title or the position within the company. So like,
No, I mean, like, say they
They'll
work
put
in
it-
an orchestra, like
yeah,
an orchestra
they'll-
hall.
yeah, they'll say that, or like somebody who
Works at a
works
hospital.
at a hospital will just say, I work at a hospital. He won't say, I'm a doctor.
Uh,
Somebody who works in a company will just say, I work for Sony, not I'm the vice president for marketing, you know?
Okay.
You know, so, Japanese people tend to just identify the group that they work for first. You gotta read their business card to find out what their job title actually is.
Oh.
Because that's on their meishi, that's on their business card, and that's where you're supposed to look to figure out, oh, this person's a big shot, so I've
Heart
gotta be
surgeon.
polite to them.
The heart surgeon at the hospital, he's not just.
Yeah, he's not an orderly, he's a heart surgeon. But yeah, you wouldn't know until you read their business card because somebody who works as an orderly at the hospital was just gonna say, Shimin Byoin ni tsutomete-masu. And somebody who is a neurosurgeon at that same hospital is gonna say, Shimin Byoin ni tsutomete-masu. So you won't know what their actual occupation is unless you ask, like, shimin byoin de nani o shimasu ka? What do you do there? And then he might say, isha desu. I'm a doctor. But he's not going to say
What kind of doctor?
what kind of doctor unless you get more specific and ask more questions. Yeah.
Well, I do remember hearing before that the word kokoro is the word for heart.
Yes.
Is it kind of similar in English where it talks about, like the metaphorical heart as well as the organ itself?
Sometimes, yeah. In fact, the actual physical heart usually is called shinzo instead. It's the same kanji. Kokoro and shin are two readings for this same kanji. But shinzo, the zo part, is a second kanji that means organ. So you're saying the heart organ as opposed to the metaphysical heart, which is both, kokoro means both heart and mind in Japanese philosophy. The ancient thinking behind this term kokoro, they didn't know about thoughts coming from the brain. Ancient China and ancient Japan thought of thoughts as coming from the heart. So that's the term. So when you're talking about kokoro, it includes feelings and thoughts because that term in Japanese encompasses both of those concepts. We divide feelings as being from the heart and thoughts coming from the mind. Japanese philosophy, I don't know what they attribute to the brain, but they attribute both thoughts and feelings to the heart.
Okay.
So it gets a little bit confusing at times, but there are a lot of idioms with kokoro that convey some of that concept, of that worldview. They talk a little bit about other idioms in here. We've got idioms such as sega takai, sega hikui, atama ga ii. But there are lots of other idioms in Japanese that are phrases.
Wait, what's the seiga part actually mean again?
Well, se is actually from senaka, which means your back.
Oh, so you have like a
So it's-
long back or a small
Yeah,
back.
well, I think senaka, the naka part is middle. So if you're saying senaka, I think that means like the middle of your body. That's your back. The back is kind of the middle of the length of you. So se by itself, I think might be like another word for
Body.
your whole body. So se ga takai, your body is tall.
Oh, so the
Seiga
guy is the
hikui.
particle.
Yeah, the ga is the particle, exactly. Se ga hikui, your body is short.
I see.
Make sense?
Yeah.
You know? And by the way, seiga hikui isn't such a horrible thing in Japan because everything's made for a shorter average than here. So you know, I had a friend who, I think she was actually Filipino also,
Oh.
and when we were in Japan, she was like, "Oh, I love it here. Everything's my size." You know, because Japanese people historically have been, on average, somewhat shorter than Europeans or even some other Asians.
I've heard that that's
Ancient
changed now, though.
It's changing. A lot of younger people in Japan are taller than previous averages. When I was there, I was still taller than average for women my own age, but there were, you know, these days there are younger women than me who are taller than me, and I think the average has gotten to be about my height, whereas I was taller than average back then.
I see.
I was also taller than most of the men over 60 when I was there. Now this was years ago,
Is
but
it like
yeah, most
spinal alignment or something, or like when they
average
hunched over?
heights have just changed. A
Okay.
lot of it has to do with diet.
Right, right.
The World War II generation was undernourished.
Yeah,
So
rations
they,
and everything.
yeah, they had less food. They had very little access to meat or dairy products of any kind. Cheese was kind of a new phenomenon for Japanese people. They didn't get a lot of cheese for a long time. And dairy in general, I mean, where are you going to put a herd of cows in Japan? There just isn't a lot of space for dairy farms or, you know, cattle raising. So meat and dairy are both expensive in Japan. These days, younger generations have eaten a lot more of it, and at least in part from that, I guess, they tend to be taller. I would guess that it's also better nutrition in
Yeah.
general as a kid, that, you know, medical care has improved, just diet in general improved. That World War II generation,
Right.
they went through some really lean years. So people from that generation tend to be very thin and very short because as kids they didn't eat enough. And so their growth was stunted, and even in old age they tend to not have ever gained a lot of weight because they were undernourished for so much of their life. Younger generations, now there's a little bit of an obesity problem in Japan these days because
It's everywhere, isn't it?
Well, they've had McDonald's for a while now.
Oh, yeah.
And,
The Japanese McDonald's are so good. They were so
and
good.
there are more tall people these days.
Just general trend
But
of
in
humanity.
general, if you're over 6 feet, you're still gonna have a hard time keeping your head pain-free, because you're
Yeah,
gonna
I'd
keep bumping
say.
it on things.
So there isn't
Yeah.
like that whole stigma, like with height over here. Is it the same that
Not-
there isn't really too much of a stigma with weight over there as well, or?
Body
'Cause-
shape in general is just a little bit more accepted as that's the way you are, I think, in
Ah.
Japanese culture. There's
They'll
just,
point it out too.
yeah,
Futoteimasu.
Yeah, because I heard that from him.
yeah,
so
you
the
can't,
cultural thing.
you can't fish for compliments, because if you're like feeling like, oh, I hope I haven't gained too much weight, and you say to your friend, oh, I feel like I might have put on a few pounds since I've been living in Japan, the answer might very well be, yeah,
Yeah.
you're fatter than you were when you got here.
Because to them, it's just not something to be embarrassed about.
Right,
That's
it's just,
how
it is what it is, and they're not that worried about it.
Yeah.
And don't forget, sumo wrestlers are huge,
Yeah,
and they
right.
do that on purpose.
Okay,
You
no, this is-
know, the average height of sumo wrestlers is taller than the average for the rest of Japan to begin with. A lot of sumo wrestlers are actually over 6 feet. They're humongous. And then they're actually really strong, because to carry around all that excess weight, they have to be really strong.
Not to mention the whole diet thing. It's not just
Yeah.
random junk. It's actually
They-
healthy stuff. Just super
Super
sized
sized.
portions.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
it
they,
doesn't matter,
and
you
high
get that fat,
carbs.
it's killing your heart.
It's still bad for your heart, yeah.
Yeah,
Sumo
'cause
wrestlers don't have a
the
very
veins.
long life
Lifespan.
expectancy, but they really live it up while they're alive. They've got all kinds of, the ones who make it big, the ones who are famous, they do not lack for girlfriends, they do not lack for money, and they do not lack for clothes and fancy cars. So, because they're celebrities, the big
It's like
name ones
athletes
who
over here.
won, yeah, they're, the big name sumo wrestlers are as big as like LeBron James here.
Wow.
That's the kind of celebrities they are.
Speaking of like how they just point out, I was
Yeah.
watching this documentary and it was cool
Yeah.
because they took like a Chinese woman,
Yeah,
a Vietnamese woman, American, a Canadian, and an English
yeah,
woman, and a dude, and they all lived in Japan.
yeah.
And one of the ladies said that she hated it because every new person she met, the first thing they would say is, "Oh, she's like how you have a small face."
Oh,
Every single person.
oh
she-
wow,
and
yeah,
she
because
was
they do tend to just sort of comment on whatever physical attribute stands out to them. So,
So, yeah, there's
you're
no
gonna get
stigma
lots
with
of
it.
comments about red hair and blue eyes, and tallness. You just can't avoid it.
And
And people in Japan are fascinated by those kinds of differences too. I mean, your hair, Sandlin's hair, you're not gonna get away from people who are fascinated by your hair,
like the
If it wasn't for the hat, I could go
One guy.
incognito.
Yeah.
he would live there forever, and like he said,
Yeah,
his least favorite phrase was "yapari," because
Yeah.
like he would try so much to, he's like, I know I'm never gonna be Japanese, but
yeah, you
it's the
try to fit
language,
in.
I can do it, and it's like, in the second I make one mistake, oh yapari, I do
Yeah,
it, and he's like, I hate that.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, the thing that used to get on my nerves was the endless comments on my skill with chopsticks. I'm like, come on. You think I just learned to use chopsticks yesterday? I've been using chopsticks since I was 10. You know, of course I know how to use chopsticks, but people would be fascinated by the fact that I could actually get the food to my mouth without making a mess of myself.
I still can't do that.
You know?
They say it's supposed to like grip it like a pencil, but I always
Yeah.
rest my pencil on my ring finger instead
Oh,
of
okay.
middle like everyone else, so it always messes it up.
Yeah, so at any rate, but yeah, Japanese people comment on stuff like that, and
There's really
Yeah.
not much of a stigma attached to that.
yeah, they don't see it as intrusive or weird to comment on people's physical appearance. They, you know, it's right out there for everybody to see. Why wouldn't they comment on it?
That's actually a pretty sound
We're
logic.
talking about like how they aren't too worried about body, shape and
Yeah.
stuff. I saw almost, I don't wanna say almost every, but a large majority of women were wearing like platform shoes or heels, trying to be
Yeah.
taller.
Yeah.
Is that an exception?
I guess, I think, you know,
It was
it's,
amazing how many.
a lot of Japanese women
Whoa.
I think Japanese women definitely obsess more about certain aspects of appearance than men do. I think that's sort of universal, but, but yeah, I knew a lot of Japanese women who liked to wear heels because they wanted to be taller. I knew one woman who had worn heels so much for so much of her lifetime that she literally was no longer comfortable in flats. Her Achilles tendons and calf muscles were so shortened by wearing heels all the time that she couldn't comfortably put her feet all the way down.
So,
Even like hanging around in the dorm, she would wear indoor, slippers. She would buy house slippers that had a heel to them. She would buy like slip-on shoes that were meant to be outdoor shoes, but she would keep them as house slippers so that she'd have something she could be comfortable in around the house, because she
Wow.
couldn't go barefoot comfortably. And most of us had, flat thongs or whatever to wear as slippers around the dorm, because you change shoes when you go inside. Even in the dorms, we had a genkan, which is where you take your outdoor shoes off, put them in a cubby, and put your indoor shoes on. And everybody, would wear slippers around the dorm, and she had ones with heels, because that's the only kind she was comfortable in. And it used to amaze me, but even in her little heels, which, her house slipper ones weren't that tall, they were like an inch and a half maybe, but
What are
she
they
was
using?
still up to here on me, even in those.
oh.
So, that's why she wore them, but, I think Japanese women obsess about wanting to be a little bit taller in a lot of cases. They worry about daikonashi, which is, they think that their calves are misshapen from sitting on their heels too much. You know how Japanese people
Oh,
sit
yeah.
on their heels a lot?
That
They-
hurts.
Well, if you do it from early childhood all the time, it doesn't hurt. You get very comfortable that way. But it does tend to give you a little bit different shape to your legs.
Oh.
It's
It's like your legs get
the
flat.
calves get kind of thick. The calves get kind of thick.
Oh, kind of like calluses or muscle development.
Yeah, I guess it's muscle development. So at any rate, so a lot of Japanese women don't like the way their legs look because of sitting in that position. But I knew a woman, one of my host moms, who was quite literally more comfortable kneeling than sitting in a Western style chair. Even when we were sitting at the kitchen table in her house, which was a Western style kitchen table, she would tuck her feet up under her on the chair because she was more comfortable that way. Because
Wow.
she was that generation, she grew up during World War II. She was that generation that had always sat that way, and that was more comfortable for her. Even when we were in the living room, they had this beautiful leather couch that was really comfy.
And
She would
knelt
sit
it
on the
too.
floor. I'd be sitting on the couch and she'd come and want to talk to me and she'd sit on the floor because it was more comfortable for her.
So she wouldn't kneel on the couch.
No, well, sometimes she would. If she was sitting on the couch, she'd still tuck her legs up under her, like that. I can't do it.
I've tried it, that hurts.
Yeah, but she would do it all the time. I've got a friend who can not only do the kneeling thing, she's in her 40s and she can still do the W, where her rear end is between her heels and her heels are, like, her legs are
Bow legs.
Yeah, like her shins are next to her thighs. Her
It's like-
calves are next to her thighs.
It's like a
She can
gymnastics maneuver.
still sit that way comfortably. She just kind of plops down on the floor like that. It's like, yep, okay, I'm comfy. Now we can talk. Seriously?
How do you do that?
Yeah. I remember her doing that when we were teenagers and I was an exchange student in her house, and she still does it to this day.
Wow.
Yeah. And, yeah, so some people are really comfortable with that. Sitting cross-legged, the way we were taught to sit, like in elementary school, they always taught us to sit Indian style. They used to call it crisscross applesauce is what they call it these days. A lot of Japanese women can't comfortably sit that way because they were taught from such an early age, that's bad manners, you can't sit that way. Because kimono. You cannot sit that way in a kimono and retain any modesty.
Does the same go for guys too? Or?
No, guys can sit that way because they wore something under the kimono traditionally.
Oh.
You know what the sumo wrestlers wear? The fundoski?
Yeah.
That is a fancier version of traditional Japanese men's underwear. That was like a loincloth. That's what Japanese men traditionally would have worn under a kimono.
Oh.
And so they could do whatever they wanted because they had something covering.
Ladies, on the other hand, not
Yeah.
so much.
They had a wrap, another wrap, another wrap, another wrap. That's it. So you part the layers and, there you go. So, yeah, that just goes back to traditional clothing styles. I mean, it doesn't even apply anymore for women who are wearing jeans half the time, or slacks. Because you can sit cross-legged in slacks
Yeah.
just fine, there's nothing wrong with it. But Japanese girls to this day get corrected if they sit cross-legged, even if they're in jeans.
So it's really more of a cultural thing now.
It's a cultural thing, yeah, it's very much so. But it's rooted in kimono wearing culture, but
Oh.
it's changing gradually. I knew some sort of hippie-ish Japanese people who were okay with women sitting cross-legged. And, one of my friends sat down like that and she's like, oh, is it okay for me to sit this way? And they were like, oh yeah, we don't mind. But they were the exception, not the rule when I was living there. So I don't know how much more it's changed since then, but, 'cause this was a long time ago, but
Right.
yeah, they were, still, I mean, I used to have to sit, since I can't sit kneeling that comfortably, I would sit with my legs out to the side, because that was like the
Mermaid
next best
position.
thing. Mermaid position was better than cross-legged. Yeah.
So it
But-
did apply to foreign people as well.
Yes. Yeah, but, that's a major cultural thing. And, it's interesting how different it is in different cultures, because in Korea, it's fine for women to sit that way because the hanbok, the traditional dress of Korea, has this enormous full skirt that can easily cover the knees when you're sitting cross-legged. That you don't have to wear a different in Korean culture, you don't have to change to maternity wear when you're pregnant because the hanbok can easily encompass
Wow.
carrying triplets.
Sounds pretty comfortable,
Yeah,
actually.
it's the dress starts from here and is like that, and then there's a blouse that goes over the top.
So it's more like a robe than anything
Yeah, it's like
else.
it's a robe from here. It's like a strapless dress underneath, and then a long sleeved blouse that's short. The blouse only comes to about here, but the two overlap plenty. So, and the jacket is usually fairly loose, and the skirt is extremely full. It's almost a full circle skirt. Yeah, it's a lot of fabric. That's a lot of silk if you're buying
Yeah.
the traditional one.
No wonder there's some silkworms went extinct.
Yeah, Yeah, so the traditional hanbok is very different, whereas the kimono is multiple layers wrapped around you, and each one tied around the middle very tightly, because there's nothing holding it together except those ties. There's no snaps, no buttons,
Right.
nothing but the ties. So if you don't tie it properly, the
You're
whole thing
going
would come
naked.
slithering apart, especially when you're working with the silk ones. But
Yeah.
they do layers. So you tie it like this, but then it gets bloused. And then you tie it again to hold the blousing in place for women's kimono. And then the obi is basically a decoration to cover up all those other ties underneath, because they don't look very pretty. So you're covering the whole thing by tying the obi around, and then there are ties to help keep the obi in place, because the obi by itself slides, because it's usually brocaded silk, unless you're working with, the cotton kimono, and then it's still some kind of polyester or something that can be fairly slippery. So you tie it in a big knot, but then you have another piece, usually like a big string that goes through the knot and all the way around your middle and ties and then tucks in to keep things in place.
Yikes. And I
Yeah.
thought suits and ties were practical.
Yeah, and so the kimono is a very complicated thing to learn to wear. And the men's kimono is somewhat less complicated, because men's kimono, when they actually tailor them to fit, they hem them. They sew them so that they're the right length for the man that they're being fitted to. Whereas women's kimono are more of a one-size-fits-all thing. They're left full length, and then they get bloused to adjust. So if you're tall like me, you've got very little room to work with. The blousing had to be done very carefully for it to fit. Somebody more petite, you've got lots of extra material. The blousing is very easy to do, and you're more concerned about, is there too much? So some women used to actually get the bottom of the kimono hemmed a little bit so that the blousing would be easier to work with, because there's a certain amount that's sort of ideal. But, yeah, and then sumo wrestlers and really tall guys have to have their kimono special orders, special made, because the traditional sizes don't accommodate that extra height or extra width in the case of the sumo wrestlers. So like my family went to this place in Kyoto that lets you borrow or rent kimonos to try on, and you can like walk around the city and take pictures in the Jinjan shrines and stuff, and then go back and give the kimono back and back into your own clothes. Well, they didn't have any but the traditional sizes, so we have photos of my brother and my dad with kimono that stop here. Mid-shin.
That's funny.
Their black socks are sticking out. It's really ridiculous. But it was the closest that they could get.
Wait, what's the normal size for guys' kimonos anyway?
If you're talking the really traditional ones, I think they were probably made for a guy who's only about my height, around 5'6". Yeah. The modern ones are now being made in longer lengths to accommodate taller men, because otherwise men would never wear kimono anymore, because they'd never be long enough.
I still have one from years ago, and,
Yeah.
and it always amazes me how short,
Yeah.
how
It's
short
a
they
man's or a woman's?
are. Woman's.
It's a woman's, yeah.
For me, though, I mean,
Yeah, because you're taller than the average for Japanese women,
yeah.
especially historically. So, yeah. Yeah, the kimonos you see on display in museums and stuff, they look long until you realize that they're full length, they're not being bloused.
Right.
And when you blouse them, you lose 3 to 4 inches of length. Yeah, at least, maybe a little more depending on how much you're trying to give it. But yeah, most kimono for women are sized for a woman who's around 5 feet tall, maybe a little more. But, they would fit Amber perfectly. She could wear all the kimonos she wants, she'd never have to struggle to find the right size. People my height have to struggle. They actually come in small, medium, and large now in the department stores. And I have to buy a large in Japan, or an extra large if I can get it. Yeah.
So when do you traditionally wear the kimonos, like festivals?
Yeah, I mean, traditionally, of course, they were everyday wear. They had daily wear ones, and then they had special occasion ones.
Right.
These days, a lot of people wear kimono for certain holidays. So like the summer dance festival, Bonodori, a lot of Japanese people will still dress up in a cotton kimono for that one. Cotton for summer.
Yeah.
And also it's considered to be more casual. Cotton yukata used to be the ones that people would use for things like
Wait, yukata?
yukata. That's
Those
what
are different, right?
That's what the cotton kimono is called, yukata.
Oh.
So they used to use yukata for example, as a bathrobe. You put on your yukata back in the old days when bathhouses were down the street because nobody had a private bath in their own house. So you would put all your shower stuff in a little carry case or something, and you would walk down the street in your kimono and your geta that you wore, the wooden clogs that don't have socks with them, and you would wear that to go down the street, go take your bath in the public bathhouse, and then put your yukata back on after you got clean and walk home again. Also, men in like the 1800s and early 1900s would often have to wear a business suit to work if they worked in a modern style company, but then they would come home and change into yukata to be comfortable because that was what they liked.
Yeah.
Women in the old days would still wear kimono daily in like Meiji period, but they would have silk kimonos for more special occasions, wool kimonos for winter casual wear, and summer was cotton. And the different styles would be for different kinds of occasions and also sometimes different ages and life stages. So like the kimono that have the sleeves that go really down all the way to like mid-shin length, those are women's kimono for single women. And the extra long sleeves were for flirting.
It's like, hi there.
Yeah, you could swing them as you were walking, and you could use it to dab at your eyes and pretend you were crying. And, you know. So the long sleeves were for flirting, and they had, you know, more room for beautiful designs, so you could show off how graceful and beautiful you were.
And it also keeps your hands warm.
The ones with the shorter squared off sleeves that come to about here were for married women and also for more casual wear. So younger women who weren't married yet would still wear the shorter sleeve style for less formal occasions.
You gotta be careful if you're cooking in those, by the way.
Yeah, well, they have a solution for that too. You take one of the waist ties,
Right.
you tie it in a big circle, you know, a single, and then you
Two circles.
yeah,
Done.
you
Yeah.
take it, you make a big thing like that, and then you twist it so that it makes like an
Right.
infinity symbol, and you put one arm through each over your back, and as it tightens across your back,
It pulls the
it
sleeves
pulls
up.
the sleeves up.
Now I know what that's for.
Yes.
So-
Okay.
So that way you can cook in it, you can clean your house in it, you can do all the work you have to do without trailing your sleeves through the sauce or whatever.
So it's
I
like a
want to know
kimono
how-
bandana.
and how delicate and how precise their touch must be and everything
Yeah.
else when they're cooking in their house. How the heck did they possibly do this?
That's how.
Yeah.
And there's a way to do it so that the tie that is connecting that piece, the tie can be like near one armpit so that you can reach under and tighten it if you need to, so that it keeps the sleeves back further. And they came up with a Western dress version of that. My host mom used to use them when she was wearing long sleeves and cooking. She had these little rubbery, stretchy things that she would put over her sleeves, and it would hike her sleeves up for her. And it was the equivalent of that thing for the kimono that she had bought in the store.
That's pretty
They,
handy.
you know, little elastics that they actually fit around her upper arms, but they, you know,
Pull the
as she,
sleeve up.
it would pull the sleeve up as she went. And it would, if she was wearing full-length sleeves, it only pushed it to about here, but that was enough to keep it out of her way. Yeah, so, yeah, so she used to use those all the time, and I was like, oh, neat idea. Because we would, you know, have to undo the button and unroll the sleeves, and she just did that instead.
Yeah.
And it would hold it, you know, if she was wearing like a button-down shirt where it's got the button at the cuff, it would hold it at the tightest point, however far it could go up her arm.
That's why I usually avoid
Yeah.
button stuff.
They used to sell them in the supermarkets in Japan. So, pretty cool stuff. Yeah, yeah, they were pretty useful.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was like a kimono-inspired solution, I guess. You know, and then the other thing they used to do, especially at the summer dance festival, the women who were really getting into the dancing, sometimes they would take the bottom corner of the cotton kimono and tuck it up into the lower tie of their waistband so that they had more freedom of movement in their legs. And, you know, the slip, the kimono slip would show a little bit, but they didn't care because it gave them more freedom of movement to enjoy the traditional dances. And there's a different way to do that where you actually, when you're blousing it, you blouse it more so that it's still tight around your thighs, but it only comes to below the knee. And that was apparently a style for people who were going to be working in the rice paddies. So if they were wearing kimono and going out to work, as opposed to the peasant drawstring pants version of the costume, they would hike their kimono up. And then there are these cloth things that you can get to cover your shins and your forearms to
Kind of like
protect.
stockings or something?
Yeah, sort of like stockings, but it leaves your hands and your feet free.
Right.
So they're
And
like
you would.
leg warmers. like
Yeah,
rice paddy leg warmers.
yeah, and you would use those to kind of keep the mud and the leeches and stuff off your skin. And then they would wear those with socks and the little tie-on straw sandals, because you want tie-on straw sandals when you're working in the muddy rice paddies.
So you don't get
because
stuck.
if you just wear slip-on shoes,
Oh,
they're gonna
yeah.
come right off, the mud will suck them right off. So they used to have shoes that were made out of straw, hand woven from straw, and then they used strips of cloth through loops on the straw sandals that crisscrossed over your feet and ankles, and they'd tie around your ankles so that they would stay on in the mud. And, you know, when you wear them out, they kind of start to dissolve into the mud eventually, and you just weave a new pair. That's how the peasants used to do
Only
sandals.
back at 9, I gotta weave a new pair of shoes for the night.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, and there were peasants who made their own, and then there were probably peasants who made extras, and then they'd go into town and sell them, and you could go buy a pair if you weren't as good at weaving sandals.
Right.
You know,
Well, that's good.
same thing with the straw hats, the conical hats that they
Is
would
there a
wear
special
for-
name for those?
Depends on the kind, but some of them, the really humongous ones, they actually call them kasa. which
Like
is
umbrellas?
Like umbrellas, yeah. It's like wearing
Umbrella
an umbrella
hats.
on your head.
That
Because
does make
some of them are humongous. There are the conical ones that are sort of the stereotype of East Asia, but then there are the flat-topped ones that are as wide as like the exaggerated sombrero that you see in tourist
Yeah.
shops. They're that wide, but they're flat on top. They come all the way up to here, and then they come down like this.
What's the purpose for those? Same
It
thing
keeps-
as
Same thing, they keep the sun and the rain off your head while you're working, and when they're that wide, they're past your shoulders, they really are like a casa. They're keeping the rain
So it's really
off
just a matter
your
of
body.
style or
Yeah.
weaving skill?
Yeah, there are different styles of weaving to make the different shapes, yeah,
Speaking of casa,
yeah.
well, umbrella, I think I left mine in your office earlier.
Okay, we'll go back for it. So are there any other questions about the chapter? We kind of got off on culture stuff, but we
Yeah.
pretty much finished the chapter, so.
Yeah,
Yeah, we've been
It's
done.
good,
yeah, I think we covered just about everything in here.
okay.
Unless you wanna go over the parts of the body, we haven't looked at that yet.
Will that be on the test though?
I don't believe I necessarily included that, I mean,
It's in the chapter.
it's in the chapters,
Yeah.
but it's in that extra, you know, the
Useful
supplementary
expressions.
section, which I usually, I leave that for last, because if we don't get to it, I don't worry about it too much, because honestly, there's so much in these chapters, they're so dense already. I feel like if we don't have time to get to the expressions, I'll let people memorize those vocabulary on their own, but I don't put it on the test.
Besides, the only one we really need to know is atama for atama ga i.
Atamagai, and then mega oki.
Yeah, for, yeah.
Mega chisai, you know, some of those, we've talked about some in context, but, yeah, I mean, they're useful to know, but if they're not getting reinforced by a lot of practice in the textbook, it's hard to make them stick anyway,
The good
so,
thing is you can practice them just every morning you wake up.
yeah,
Yeah,
Hana, ka, kuchi, ne.
yeah,
it's like morning aerobics except for the language.
Yeah, exactly.
right,
Mimi,
yeah, yeah,
Mimi.
yeah,
Speaking
I believe somebody has come up with a way to put head, shoulders, knees, and toes to Japanese, so if you like to sing, you can figure that one out. I think, I'm sure there must be a video of it somewhere on YouTube, Japanese song version of head, shoulders, knees, and toes, so go Google it and have fun.
Yeah.
But, no, that's pretty much it. We are pretty much out of time for today, so if nobody has other burning questions, we have
So much stuff.
So much culture stuff too.
So UCF orientation.